Alright everyone, it's time for a little bit of a special video here because Cuomo, little Andy, has decided to resign. It's interesting because this is sort of the same kind of fall from grace that we saw from Michael Avenatti really not that long ago. You remember CNN, Chris Cuomo being a major anchor there, I wonder why, and all of these other groups within the legacy media. Certainly certain Democrats had bounced around the idea of Andy Cuomo being potentially a presidential contender even in 2020, which didn't happen, but certainly 2024, looking forward to that. Cuomo is one of the more recognizable names and reasonably well-spoken. I can think of 100 things to say about Cuomo, very few of which are kind, but he's not a poor speaker. And that sets him, head and shoulders above most Democrats. You look at the laundry list of people likely to run in 2024. There's a fairly short list with regards to people that are actually even remotely qualified. I think the Democrats are very concerned about that. You'll remember, he wrote a best-selling book to the effect of his COVID response. That was definitely premature because, of course, then New York, fairly quickly thereafter, went on to become #1 for COVID cases and deaths in the country. I think per capita death rate was considerably higher. It's very funny to watch these people now rant about DeSantis when the current Delta variant wave is probably going to come to a close fairly soon, which again worries them because they want to be able to fearmonger ahead of the midterms especially. Now, Cuomo's resigning specifically because of the state AG's report with regards to the Me Too allegations against him. He's got like a dozen friggin' people who claimed he harassed them sexually, he touched them inappropriately, he made inappropriate advances towards them. It was very, very interesting to see for months and months and months. The Democrats didn't throw him under the bus. If this had been a Republican politician or even the average Democrat, he'd have been out long ago. He refused initially to resign. He had refused to resign and told people many months ago, well, wait for the state AG's report. State AG report comes out. Days go by and he still doesn't resign. I was trolling him on Twitter pretty much every day. Every time he's like, oh, there'll be an announcement at 12 o'clock a.m. or whatever. And it's like, well, are you resigning? Are you resigning yet, Andy? When are you going? When are you going to give the Democrats some breathing room? This is actually a good thing for the Democratic Party. I made a video only 2 days ago. I think it was a New Tech exclusive, if I remember correctly, about Cuomo not resigning, being a godsend to the people who oppose the Democratic Party, because it's goddamn dead weight. And now I'm wondering to myself, how much money did they have to give him? What did they have to promise to him? Not prosecuting him? Helping to cover for him legally, regardless of outcome? Did they sign a nice big fat 7-figure check? What did they do to get Andy Cuomo, who clearly, he would have presidential ambitions. He's an ambitious kind of guy. He's a mafioso, just like his Fredo brother. He likes being in the limelight and he likes power. With that kind of person, clearly something was given to him to get him to step down. It looked like he was actually long haul going to force them to impeach and remove him from office. Maybe he just said, hey, I get a pension. I'm still Andy Cuomo. I made millions of dollars on my best-selling book, even though it's been canned now. What the fuck do I have to care about? I'll move to a cabin in the woods. I'm still worth... How much is he worth? What's his net worth at this point? Probably upwards of 10 million or something like that. The governor of New York. New York's a machine politics state. It's basically Tammany Hall on steroids. You can get all sorts of money. You can easily get 5-10 grand a plate at your gala dinner. Whether you're running for office or not makes no difference. But I thought the worst thing about this, and we'll never get probably closure on this, is that the people of New York didn't start demanding Andy Cuomo resign until the state AG report. Well, firstly, that's hypocrisy, because if you had that many allegations against any other politician, people would be calling for their head. So Cuomo, he gets to skate. He gets a pass on that until the report comes out and makes it official. With anyone else, they don't get that benefit of the doubt. Very interesting. Secondly, what's the problem with COVID? He writes a best-selling book about it, but he had been lying to the people of his state, undercounting deaths by a significant amount. He had claimed that 9,000 excess deaths in the wake of the initial report had happened in nursing homes around New York as the result of his particular mismanagement. Now, he doesn't cast it that way. It's the result of his mismanagement. But he cast it off as, well, we're sorry, but 9,000 people died that shouldn't have died. It turned out it was 15,000. Nobody called for him to resign that wasn't already partisan in nature, number one, or politically adept and aware, which is a very, very rare breed, number two. The Democratic partisans and even some Republicans in the state of New York didn't call for his resignation as the result of him lying to the whole state. Now, the Me Too thing is terrible. Harassing your staffers and groping people against their will, that's bad stuff. But it doesn't affect the whole state. Maybe it speaks to the character of the now former governor of New York, but it doesn't affect anyone as far as beyond that very small scope of people. What does affect everyone is when 15,000 grandparents are dead in nursing homes because Cuomo chose to take those that were sick, and instead of putting them in the hospital, which he could have done, there was no near limited capacity in hospitals. They built that giant field hospital that never got used. I can't remember where they built that. They had excess beds. They could have accommodated all the elderly during the first wave of COVID, and they chose not to. They took people that were sick, and instead of segregating them from other people who were vulnerable, they put them right back in the nursing homes to die, and they got other people good and sick too. It's almost like Cuomo's like, well, there's 15,000 people that the state doesn't have to subsidize. These are people we don't have to care for anymore. We're making money head over heels. Oh man, this is going to be great. Wait till my donors hear this. I'm sure they'll want to sign a fat check to me yet again. And he'll probably do it again. If you think this is the end of Andy Cuomo in the political sphere, I don't think you know how New York politics works. As a Vermonter, as someone from that stretch of mountains and occasional farmland between the state of New York and Canada, essentially, and so people think of us, that and maple syrup. And dairy cows. Unfortunately, fewer and fewer because of coronatarianism shutting down a bunch of family-owned dairies. As someone who has lived near the border with New York, and the news overlaps, especially with upstate New York. If you look at WCAX, it's upstate New York, like the mountains, Vermont and New Hampshire. We get political ads from New York. We get news from New York. We hear everything that's going on in New York because nothing exciting happens in New England for the most part, unless you're in Boston or certain parts of Connecticut or Providence or something. We hear about New York, state and city. New York is not a normal state, politically speaking, or socially speaking. New Yorkers are a different breed. It's funny because 90% of the state is actually deep red. It's like fucking Wyoming or Alabama or something like that. Most people think of it as New York City and possibly Albany. And then they ignore the Great Lakes region with Rochester and Buffalo and all these other places. Cuomo, in the end, will be remembered as a good governor of New York in the sense that he really represented the wishes of his constituency. He was voted into power by New York City. He governed like a New York City tycoon. He took the dark money. He took the slush funds. He took the kickbacks. He gave the favors. He harassed his staffers Clinton style. The only thing that went wrong in his case is that he got caught out doing it, and he's not going to face any repercussions for his COVID mismanagement. If anything, he'll continue to be applauded by idiots for it. He'll never face any kickback, probably, for fiscal mismanagement, for lockdownerism, for draining the state coffers over and over again. Basically, New York is a sponge. New York City and Albany take all the money, and everyone else has to work to pay for it. But this is not just Cuomo. To be clear, it's not singularly his responsibility. That's basically every governor in a long time in the state of New York. And if you think, by the way, that the now former deputy governor, that she'll do a better job and be less corrupt because she's got a vagina, that's just not going to happen. Again, you don't know anything about New York politics. Glad he's gone. Yet another person with massive Trump derangement syndrome down, just like Michael Avenatti and all of these others. But it's not going to repair the state of New York. It's not going to make New York less corrupt. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, it'll continue to be heavily locked down, authoritarian. There will be a lot of taxes, a tax on the right to bear arms, and all of these other things. And Cuomo really is just a very small symptom of a larger disease, which is the far leftism of New York. That's about all. Peace out.